I was sitting alone in my apartment when my phone buzzed. Just a normal Tuesday evening. I was exhausted from work, hadn't even changed out of my clothes yet. The notification lit up my screen, and I saw their names. Mom and Dad. My chest did that stupid hopeful thing it always does when I see a message from them. Maybe they were checking in. Maybe they finally remembered I existed. I opened it. We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely. 17 words. That's all it took to shatter everything I thought I knew about my place in this world. 17 words to erase 30 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love that apparently meant absolutely nothing. I stared at that message until the letters started to blur. I read it again and again, hoping, praying, that somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something kinder. Something that didn't feel like a knife sliding between my ribs. The room felt smaller suddenly. The walls pressed in. My breath caught somewhere in my throat and just stayed there. Trapped. Like me. Like I'd always been trapped in a family that never really saw me as anything more than a resource to drain. But here's the part that makes my blood boil even now. Here's the part that turned confusion into rage. They didn't even write that message themselves. My uncle typed it. Every single word. While they sat there and watched him do it. While they nodded along like obedient children being told what to think, what to feel, what to say to their own daughter who'd been carrying them for years. If family has ever blindsided you like this, if the people who were supposed to protect you ever turned into strangers overnight, don't wait. Hit subscribe before the next twist catches you off guard. Because this story gets darker. So much darker than you think. And if you're not subscribing yet, tell me why in the comments. I'm really curious what's stopping you from joining people who actually understand what betrayal tastes like. That moment when the text landed, when those 17 words burned themselves into my brain, I felt something inside me just break. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies where someone screams or throws things. It was quieter than that. Deeper than that. It was the sound of trust shattering. The feeling of ground that you thought was solid suddenly giving way beneath your feet. My hands were shaking. I remember that clearly. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room, watch it smash against the wall, destroy the thing that just delivered this nightmare into my lap. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, reading those words over and over and over again until they stopped feeling like language and started feeling like violence. We need distance from you. From me. From the daughter who paid their mortgage when Dad lost his job. From the daughter who covered Mom's medical bills without being asked. From the daughter who showed up for every holiday, every birthday, every random Tuesday when they needed someone to fix their problems. Please stop contacting us completely. Please. Like they were doing me a favor. Like severing their own child from their lives was some kind of gift wrapped in politeness. I kept rereading it, hoping the words would rearrange into something kinder. Something that at least pretended they gave a damn about the person they raised. The person who loved them so fiercely it actually hurt. But the words didn't change. They just sat there on that screen, cold and final and absolutely devastating. And you want to know the worst part? The part that makes me want to scream even now. I blamed myself. In that moment, sitting alone in my apartment with my whole world crumbling, my first thought wasn't, what did they do? It was, what did I do wrong? Because that's what they trained me to think. That's what happens when you grow up being treated like you're never quite enough. Like your love is a burden instead of a gift. Like your existence is something to tolerate rather than celebrate. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people you trusted most, if you've ever had your heart ripped out by the very people who were supposed to protect it, whisper, I get it in the comments. Because nobody should face that silence alone. Nobody should feel that kind of pain and think they're the only one drowning in it. This didn't start with a text message. It started years ago. Decades ago, really. It started so slowly, I didn't even notice the pattern forming until it had already wrapped itself around my throat. I was always the different one. The one who didn't quite fit. While my siblings laughed at the dinner table, trading inside jokes and getting seconds on dessert, I was in the kitchen washing dishes, scrubbing pots, cleaning up everyone else's mess while they bonded over moments I wasn't invited to join. When my brother crashed Dad's car, it was an accident. When I forgot to pick up milk from the store, it was a lecture about responsibility that lasted an hour. When my sister dropped out of college, they paid for her apartment and called it supporting her journey. When I asked for help with textbooks, I got a speech about learning to be independent. The rules were different for me. They always had been. And I accepted it because that's what you do when you're conditioned to believe your place in the family is earned, not given. That love is something you have to work for instead of something you deserve simply for existing. I remember holidays where I'd show up with gifts I couldn't afford, trying so hard to prove I was worth keeping around. I'd watch my siblings arrive empty-handed and still get hugs, get praise, get treated like they hung the moon. And I'd smile. I'd pretend it didn't slice me open every single time. But the real poison didn't start flowing until he showed up. My uncle, Dad's younger brother. The one who always had big ideas and bigger failures. He lost his job, again, and needed somewhere to stay. Just temporarily, they said. Just until he got back on his feet. That was 3 years ago. He slid into our family like oil spreading across water. Smooth. Insidious. Contaminating everything he touched. At first, it was small things. Comments during dinner about how some people take advantage of family generosity. Suggestions that maybe my parents were being too soft on certain children. And we all knew he meant me. Little seeds of doubt planted so carefully that my parents didn't even realize they were being manipulated. He positioned himself as the wise advisor. The voice of reason. The one who could see things clearly because he wasn't blinded by parental love. And my parents? They ate it up. They started repeating his phrases. Adopting his perspectives. Viewing me through his poisonous lens instead of their own eyes. I'd call to check in, and Mom's voice would be cold. Distant. Like she was reading from a script someone else had written. I'd offer to help with something, and Dad would respond with suspicion instead of gratitude. "What do you want?" became his standard greeting. Like my love had to have an ulterior motive. Like kindness was a transaction that always came with hidden fees. Looking back now, the signs were there. I just didn't know what he was preparing them for. I didn't understand that every conversation, every whispered conference behind closed doors, every time they chose his version of reality over mine, it was all building towards something. But we'll get to that. Have you ever been loyal to people who only remembered you when they needed something? Have you ever given everything you had to people who treated your love like it was worthless the moment it became inconvenient? Drop a broken heart if you've felt that kind of weight pressing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe, impossible to understand why you're never enough. The second message came 3 hours later. 3 hours of me sitting in that same spot, phone clutched in my hands, mind racing through every possible explanation. Every memory, every conversation, every moment trying to pinpoint what I'd done to deserve this. When my phone buzzed again, I actually felt hope. Stupid, desperate hope that maybe they'd realized their mistake. That maybe they'd sent the wrong message. That maybe this was all some horrible misunderstanding that we could laugh about later. I opened it. He helped us pack everything. It's better this way. 16 words this time. 16 words that felt rehearsed. Structured. Cold. Words that didn't sound anything like my parents'. Words that had my uncle's fingerprints all over them. He helped us pack everything. Pack what? Pack where? What the hell was happening? And that phrase, "It's better this way." I could practically hear his voice shaping it. That condescending tone he used when he wanted to sound wise, but really just sounded cruel. That fake concern that masked pure manipulation. I read it 5 times. 10 times. And with each reading, something shifted inside me. The grief started hardening into something sharper. Something colder. Something that finally saw the situation clearly for what it was. They weren't confused. They weren't misguided. They'd made a choice. A conscious, deliberate choice to cut me out of their lives while my uncle pulled the strings like I was the villain in a story he'd been writing for 3 years. My fingers moved before my brain fully caught up. the anger and hurt fusing into a clarity I hadn't felt in decades. I typed, "Of course. I'll cancel my direct deposits first thing. No begging. No crying. No desperate, please explain what I did wrong," that they'd ignore anyway. Just a simple statement of fact. Professional. Clean. Final. Because here's what my uncle didn't know when he was composing those cold little messages on their behalf. Here's what they forgot in their hurry to distance themselves from me. I'd been supporting them financially for 8 years. Every month, like clockwork, money transferred from my account to theirs. Mortgage payments, utility bills, car insurance, groceries, medical expenses. All of it flowing from my paycheck to their bank account because they needed help, and I was the only one capable of providing it. My siblings? They had their own lives, their own problems, their own excuses for why they couldn't contribute. But me? I was reliable, dependable, the one who showed up with money and help and unwavering loyalty no matter how they treated me. And now they were done with me? Now I was the problem they needed distance from? Fine. I hit send. Then I sat back and waited for reality to come knocking on their door. Tell me honestly, was that the right move or the wrong one? Some people say I should have forgiven them without question. That family is family, and you don't abandon family no matter what they do to you. Others say I waited too long, that I should have cut them off years ago instead of funding my own mistreatment. What do you think? Drop your honest opinion in the comments because I need to know if I'm the villain they painted me as, or if I finally did what I should have done a long time ago. The fallout started within 24 hours. I didn't have to do anything dramatic. Didn't have to make threats or send angry messages or tell them how much they'd hurt me. I just did exactly what I said I'd do. Canceled the direct deposits. Simple. Clean. Done. The first call came from the pharmacy. Dad's medication payment had bounced. Could they call back with another payment method? I didn't answer. The second call was the electric company. Past due notice. Service interruption scheduled unless payment received within 48 hours. I let it go to voicemail. Then the landlord. Confused message asking if there was a problem with the account because rent hadn't cleared and this wasn't like them, and was everything okay? I deleted it. Each notification felt like a tiny act of justice. Each bounced payment, each declined transaction, each confused creditor. They were all pieces of reality, finally catching up to the people who thought they could use me and discard me without consequence. But here's where it gets interesting. My parents didn't contact me. Not once. Not to ask what happened. Not to apologize. Not even to yell at me for cutting off the money they'd grown so dependent on. Radio silence. But my uncle? Oh, my uncle called. The voicemail he left was fascinating. I must have listened to it 20 times, hearing the shift in his tone. The cracks in that confident manipulator facade. His voice wasn't smooth anymore. Wasn't controlled. Wasn't dripping with that fake wisdom he'd been poisoning my parents with for 3 years. He sounded panicked. Desperate. Angry in that specific way people get when their schemes fall apart, and they can't believe someone had the audacity to stop playing their game. You need to call your parents immediately. Whatever issue you're having, this is not the way to handle it. This is childish. This is vindictive. They raised you better than this. They raised me better than this. That line made me laugh. Actually laugh. A bitter, sharp sound that hurt coming out. They raised me to be a doormat. To accept mistreatment with a smile. To fund my own invisibility and call it love. To sacrifice everything while they sacrificed nothing, and then thank them for the privilege of being used. Yeah, they raised me perfectly for that role. But I was done auditioning for it. The messages kept coming. Not from mom or dad, never from them, but from my uncle. Each one more frantic than the last. Each one revealing just how much they'd been depending on my money. How much their entire lifestyle had been built on my silent support. You're destroying this family. Think about what you're doing to your mother. This is elder abuse. Elder abuse. That was my favorite. As if cutting off voluntary financial support, I was never obligated to provide somehow constituted abuse. As if 30 years of emotional neglect and manipulation didn't count because it left no visible bruises. Then came the message from my sister. Sweet, innocent sister who'd never contributed a dime, but always had opinions about how I should handle things. Mom's really upset. Can't you just talk to them? No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just an expectation that I'd cave. That I'd come crawling back. That I'd be the bigger person and fix what they broke. But I wasn't that person anymore. That person died the moment they sent that first text. The moment they chose a manipulative uncle over their own daughter. The moment they proved that my value to them began and ended with what I could provide. Ever stood up for yourself and instantly became the problem? Ever been the villain in someone else's story simply because you stopped letting them destroy you? Type enough if you've lived that moment. If you finally said no and watched people lose their minds because you were supposed to keep saying yes forever. Months passed. Beautiful, quiet months where I didn't wake up anxious about their problems. Didn't check my bank account and wince at the automatic transfers draining my paycheck. Didn't field calls about crisis after crisis that I was expected to solve with my money and emotional labor. For the first time in my adult life, my time was mine. My money was mine. My peace was mine. I moved to a smaller apartment. Cheaper, cozier, mine in a way their house never felt. I paid off debt I'd accumulated helping them. Started saving. Started living. Started remembering what it felt like to exist without constantly bracing for the next demand. The silence from them became comfort instead of punishment. Every day without their voices in my ear was a day I could hear my own thoughts. Could figure out who I was when I wasn't performing the role of dutiful daughter for an audience that never appreciated the show. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt. Some nights I'd still reach for my phone, muscle memory almost calling them before my brain caught up. Holidays were weird. Birthdays felt hollow. There were moments, brief, sharp moments, where I missed the fantasy of them. The parents they could have been. The family we never actually were. But I didn't break. Didn't crawl back. Didn't apologize for finally choosing myself. And then one ordinary Tuesday, exactly like the Tuesday that shattered everything, my phone rang. My sister's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Almost sent it to voicemail like I had with every other call from anyone connected to them. But something made me pick up. Her voice was different. Smaller. Uncertain in a way I'd never heard from her before. Something happened, she said. Dad had a medical emergency. Mom can't handle everything alone. The bills are piling up again. They lost the house, they're staying with Uncle now, but it's bad. Really bad. And they need. Let me stop you right there, I said. My voice was calm. So calm it surprised me. What do they need? She hesitated. Help. Financial help. You were always good at managing this stuff, and... No. Silence on the other end. Thick, confused silence. No, she repeated like I'd spoken a foreign language. I'm living the life you pushed me away from. I hope you find your footing the way I found mine. I could hear her breathing. Could practically feel her searching for the right words. The manipulation tactic that would work. The guilt trip that would land. But I didn't give her the chance. I paid their bills for 8 years while being treated like an inconvenience. While watching all of you get love and support and grace I had to purchase with money I couldn't afford to give. They cut me off without a conversation. Without an apology. Without a moment of hesitation. So now they get to figure it out without me. Just like they wanted. But they're our parents. They were my parents too. Until they decided they weren't. Tell them I hope Uncle's advice serves them better than my money did. I hung up. And I felt nothing. No rage. No guilt. No second-guessing. Just quiet, solid certainty that I'd done the right thing. If silence ever became your freedom too, if walking away from people who hurt you was the kindest thing you ever did for yourself, drop a crescent moon. We heal together here. We understand what it costs to choose peace over chaos, dignity over dysfunction, ourselves over people who never chose us back. And trust me, the next twist in this story is even darker. Subscribe so you don't miss what really happened behind the scenes. What my uncle was really doing all those years. What they're dealing with now that I'm gone. This story isn't over. Not even close. Here's what nobody tells you about cutting off toxic family. The freedom tastes like guilt at first. You wait for the relief to feel pure. For the peace to feel earned. But instead, it comes mixed with this bitter aftertaste of maybe I should have tried harder, And what if they actually needed me? And am I really the villain they say I am? It took me months to stop flinching every time my phone buzzed. Months to stop crafting imaginary conversations where they apologized, and I forgave them, and everything magically made sense. Months to accept that closure sometimes comes from within because the people who hurt you will never give you the apology you deserve. But slowly, painfully, beautifully slowly, something shifted. I stopped waiting for them to understand. Stopped needing them to acknowledge what they'd done. Stopped measuring my worth by whether or not they finally saw me as valuable. Because here's the truth they never understood. My value wasn't determined by how much I could give them. My worth wasn't calculated by how much pain I could endure while smiling. My place in this world wasn't defined by my utility to people who confused love with exploitation. I started therapy. Real therapy with someone who didn't tell me that family is family and blood is thicker than water, and all those toxic platitudes people throw at you when they want you to accept abuse quietly. My therapist said something that changed everything. You can love people from a distance that doesn't destroy you. I cried when she said that. Ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. Because nobody had ever given me permission to love them and protect myself at the same time. Nobody had ever told me that those two things could coexist. That leaving wasn't betrayal, it was survival. I learned that grief doesn't just come from death. It comes from realizing the parents you needed never existed. From burying the fantasy family you kept hoping would materialize if you just tried hard enough, gave enough, hurt enough. I grieved them. Properly grieved them. Not the people they actually were, cold, manipulative, selfish, but the people they could have been. Should have been. The parents I deserved who never showed up. And once I let myself grieve, I could finally start healing. I made new friends. Real friends who showed up without invoices. Who supported me without expecting payment. Who valued my presence instead of my presence. I dated someone kind. Someone who didn't view my boundaries as inconveniences or my needs as demands. Someone who chose me consistently instead of conditionally. I built a life that didn't require permission or approval from people who never gave me either. And somewhere along the way, the guilt faded. The anger softened. Not because they deserved forgiveness. They didn't. But because carrying rage is exhausting and I was tired of letting them occupy space in my heart they no longer deserved access to. I released the bitterness the moment I released the responsibility that was never mine to carry. Their happiness was never my job. Their financial stability was never my obligation. Their dysfunction was never my problem to solve. Sometimes the people you'd walk through fire for won't even light a candle for you. And that's when you learn who you really are. Not who they told you to be. Not the role they assigned you. But who you actually are when you're brave enough to stop performing for an audience that never appreciated the show. You learn that you're stronger than you thought. That you can survive the loss of people you thought you couldn't live without. That peace isn't something you have to earn. It's something you claim when you finally stop accepting chaos as love. I'm not going to lie and say I don't still have hard days. Days when I see families laughing together and feel that old ache of what I never had. Days when I wonder if I'm too damaged to ever fully trust anyone again. But those days are fewer now. Quieter. Manageable. Most days I wake up grateful. Grateful for the silence. Grateful for the space to discover who I am outside of their dysfunction. Grateful that I had the courage to walk away even when every instinct told me to stay and fix and give more of myself until there was nothing left. If you've ever chosen peace over chaos, even when it hurt, even when people called you selfish, even when you felt guilty for finally protecting yourself, type I choose peace. Your strength matters here. Your decision to save yourself matters. You matter, regardless of whether the people who should have told you that ever did. And to anyone still trapped in the cycle I escaped, you don't owe them your destruction. You don't owe them your mental health, your financial stability, your entire life as payment for the love they should have given freely. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to choose you, even if, especially if, they never did. This is your permission slip. Your sign from the universe. Your moment to recognize that staying isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. Walk away. Choose yourself. Build the life they told you didn't deserve. And watch how quickly you bloom when you're finally planted in soil that nourishes instead of drains you.